right, welcome everybody to the Jim Acosta Show. It is Wednesday, and as you can see, it is Rosie O'Donnell Day on the
Hello.
Jim Acosta Show. Rosie, how are you? Great to see you.
Yes, I am wonderful, and I'm a huge fan of yours and a big supporter. And reached out when you did such a brave thing that you did over there at your job, and I was very moved and inspired. And I want everyone
Uh,
to know that, and you to know that, and that's why I sent you that little note.
I appreciate it. It warmed my heart. It was just the shot in the arm that I needed. And you've inspired me with this new documentary that you're doing, Unleashing Hope: The Power of Service Dogs for Children with Autism. It's out on Hulu. It's about how dogs can help children with autism, and it is just so beautiful. And I want to talk to you about all of this because there's a lot of news going on here in the States, but I guess we just get this out of the way. You are, and somebody's asking this question right now. Did you move to Ireland? You're in Ireland right now. You're in
Yes,
Dublin.
I am. I'm in Dublin, Ireland. I read Project 2025, which I assumed all Americans would do, and was surprised to find out that many people did not. Once I read that, I made a plan to leave should he win.
Mm.
And that plan was executed on the day in November that he won, she said, raising her eyebrows. And I made the plan, and we were out by the 15th. My plan
Mm.
was to be out before he was inaugurated. And I have relatives. My grandparents are from Ireland, so I have birthright citizenship options here. And it was the only country I considered coming to. And I took my little 12-year-old non-binary autistic child, and we showed up. I have two cousins here. They've been wonderful, and it's been a glorious transition, I have to say,
Wonderful.
Jim. I was not one of those celebrities who said I will leave if he gets. I never imagined leaving the United States. I
Interesting.
didn't even travel very much. I
And did
didn't.
you think about this beforehand and say, okay, if he wins, I'm going to do this,
Yes,
and you just kind of
because
kept it to yourself?
yes, I kept it to myself. I talked to my therapist about it. I talked to my family, my grown children, and I told them, and all my friends and family said, "Oh, you'll never do it." Because I'm someone who, like, if someone says to me, "I got tickets to the Riviera in Italy and we can go," and I'm like, Miami's nice.
Yeah,
Like, I'm
it's
not one of
far.
those. It's, yeah, kind of far. And I'm not a big traveler. I'm not a big, like, leave the United States person. So
Mm.
it surprised all of them, and it kind of surprised me, but I was certain. There was not a moment's hesitation. When I read Project 2025, when the Supreme Court said that he had presidential immunity, I knew that we were on the verge of fascism in America. And even though that was unimaginable to most 63-year-olds like me, I knew that's where we were going. And I have no doubt about his level of cruelty. I have no illusions about him having a heart. I know him deeply and personally, although I've never spoken to the man.
Mm.
I know him from how he's treated me over the last
He-
18 years
yeah, he
when he
seems to
was
be
not the
obsessed with
president.
you.
Yes, he does. He
He's
does seem to
obsessed.
be obsessed.
And
Yes.
what is that? Do we know what that's about? It's because you've criticized him in the past. I mean,
He had Miss America pageant, Miss Teen America, this Tara O'Connor, I believe her name was, and she was in the
yeah,
village. She kissed a girl. She was drunk, and the Post printed it. And he, right before The View was live, had a press conference to make her publicly apologize. And it looked to me a lot like a pimp and a prostitute.
mm,
And I said that on The View, and then I proceeded to tell factual, accurate information about his bankruptcies, about how he was not a self made man. I told facts that anyone
yeah,
could have Googled and found out.
yeah.
And he went batshit crazy. He went on every single show. I went to a sports bar with my children who were very little at the time
Yeah.
because I thought, well, at a sports bar, we could get them grilled cheese and chicken nuggets. And he wouldn't. He was on a sports show talking about what a horrible person I am, a degenerate. Every word he could use for gay that was not
I
saying gay,
remember
he
that.
would, yes, calling me fat and disgusting, misogynist, homophobic, every way he could. And he did it for 18 years.
And it says more about him than anything else. I mean, that the fact that he said all of those ugly things, back in the day, and the fact that he remains obsessed with you, it says to me that you got his goat, as we used to
Well,
say.
I grew up in New York, and I
Yeah,
remember when his planes were repossessed off the runways at LaGuardia. I remember when they put out the documentary and he was talking about how poor he was. I remember the stories of him pretending to date Madonna, of him calling people and pretending to be his own publicist,
yeah,
him lying about his book sales being number one. The man lies
yeah.
chronically, like a teenage boy.
Well, and I say this all the time that New Yorkers know him better than anybody. They're the
Yeah.
least surprised people in the world. Whenever you talk to people from New York who've been in New York for a long time about Donald Trump, they just roll their eyes and they say, "I've known about this since the '80s or whatever." I mean, it,
Yes, the same with me. I grew up knowing about that this man was the laughing stock of New York and no one took him seriously. I
yeah,
would never have him on my show. And he asked over and over and over. And finally, we did a thing where Listerine was paying money for everybody who would come on and sweep. All they didn't get to talk to me. All they did was enter through the curtain and sweep the floor, and they would pay us $1,000 to charity for everybody who was sweeping. Well, one day I let him come on the show to be a sweeper, and that was the only time he was ever on my program. And he was mad at me because of that as well. But
I'm
he was
sure.
never a man of any merit that I wanted to waste time to
Mm.
speak to. And I think that gets his goat in a manner that he doesn't know how to deal with.
Yeah, and but he's somehow gotten back in the White House. I mean, I think I read that you have a big problem with the show The Apprentice, and I do think you're right that it
Mm.
did sell people a bill of goods, and it portrayed something about him that just doesn't exist.
No, listen, it was
Yeah,
pure fiction, Jim.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was pure fiction. To say that this man was a business giant when he had been
yeah,
bankrupt 6 times, to say he was a self made millionaire when he got all his money from his daddy, to say that he was some moral authority when he had all these affairs on all of these wives and all of these sexual
yeah,
abuse charges. It was like Mark Burnett, the producer of The Apprentice, taught him how to take a lie, say it long enough, and make it the truth. He
yeah,
had a little family owned grifter business in New York. He was a logo slapper. He didn't build buildings, he slapped his name on buildings that other people built. And
yeah.
usually they were not very high quality buildings
That's
either.
true. Yeah.
And so, if you grew up in New York, all of these facts were available to you, and daily you would get them in the newspaper.
Well,
So, it wasn't a surprise.
And I remember when I covered him during the campaign in 2016, I would go into Trump Towers, the first time I'd ever gone into Trump Tower. I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And I go in there and I'm like, why is this place such a dump? Why does it look
Yeah.
so shitty? Like the gold plating and stuff was kind of faded. And you would go down to the men's room and it was like, wow, this is kind of like Penn Station. I mean, it's not that,
Yes, well, he has no taste.
yeah,
He's very gaudy. He
yeah,
thinks that gold lame will fool people, and he would probably sell it as gold if he had a
yeah.
chance. His
That's
steaks went out of business. I
true.
remember I had somebody gave me he had some liquor company at one point, and somebody gave me a closed bottle of his liquor with two bugs in it. Like
Oh
there were
my
two dead flies in
God.
it, and in a
Jeez.
sealed bottle of liquor. And I
Wow.
kept it
Don't
on my
drink it.
counter for many, many years. But this man has failed at almost everything he's ever tried.
Yeah.
And to think that so many people believed the lie that Mark Burnett told over and over. Mark Burnett, not born in this country. Mark
Mm,
Burnett, who made a lot of money
yeah.
in off of this. I always said, does he have a conscience? Does he
Yeah.
feel any remorse over what he let loose on our
Uh,
nation?
and it's still letting loose. And he's put incredibly irresponsible people in some very important positions. I know because of the issue of autism being near and dear to your heart, we have to talk about RFK Jr. And
Oh,
this is just being reported today. CBS News reporting today the National Institutes of Health is amassing private medical records from a number of federal and commercial databases to give to HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And his effort to study autism, and it will allow external researchers picked for Kennedy's autism studies to study comprehensive patient data with broad coverage of the US population for the first time. I mean, it just seems like an incredible invasion of privacy to go on this wild goose chase, chasing after his conspiracy theories.
well, and we cannot forget that the Nazis first came after the disabled people, and they had to compile a list before they did that. And who the hell is RFK Jr. to tell people who is a worthy human being and who is not?
Mm.
Who does he think he is, saying the first credit against them was, the first complaint he had against them, they will never pay taxes, they will never
Yeah.
go to the bathroom
What does that
unassisted.
mean?
So some woman
Yeah.
who's taking care of her autistic child, who helps the child in the bathroom, as millions of Americans help people they love every day in ways that maybe are not the most appealing to other people. They do it because they love their family members, and their value is in their innate being, not
Yeah.
in how well they
That's
pay
right.
taxes or use the bathroom. And I think the fact that the Kennedy family created the Special Olympics, and here
Mm.
is this rogue Kennedy, this embarrassment to the rest of the family, going
Mm.
about with first of all, that he tried to get into Kamala's cabinet and she said, "Oh no, 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 no." And
Exactly.
then he went over to the enemy side and kissed the golden piece of turd.
Yeah.
I could not believe it. And I can't believe what he's allowed to get away with. And I can't believe that the public is not calling for his firing immediately.
Well, and I think part of it is because, you have Signalgate and Pete Hegseth, and that's just been a daily embarrassment over at the Pentagon. But I consider what's happening over at HHS and in our public health sector with RFK Jr.'s leadership perhaps to be the most critical emergency that this country faces right now. You have
I agree with you
measles taking off
100%.
in West
Yes.
Texas. Yeah,
And
yeah,
his lies about vaccines and all of
yeah,
that is responsible for the outbreak of measles. And
yeah,
who is he? He is not a medical expert. He is not a doctor. Who does he think he is? It
yeah.
boggles my mind, his hubris. It boggles my mind, his ego. How does he think he has the right, because his last name is a Kennedy and he has none of the qualities of his father or his uncle,
Mm.
none of Caroline or JFK Jr.? He has none of Ted Kennedy. He's like this rogue Kennedy who has gotten away with being a horrible spokesperson for the American people. And how dare he? How
Yeah.
dare he? I hope, honestly, Jim, that I never have to see him, because I was friendly and used to play poker with his wife. And
Mm.
I asked her before he went to the Trump side, how did it feel to marry a Kennedy? That must have been pretty trippy for you, you know? And I got to know her and
This
felt,
is Cheryl Hines.
Cheryl Hines.
Yeah.
And we played poker during COVID twice a week
Mm.
with about 6 or 7 women we knew in LA. And, I don't know what I would say if I saw her. I don't know. I hope I never have to see him in person, because I don't know that I could be able to contain my disgust with him.
Yeah, well,
I
I mean,
think
he said the other day, genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin. So even as the head of HHS, he's still peddling this thing, and we know autism rates among children have increased. This is according to the New York Times just recently. They've increased nearly fivefold since 2000, when the CDC first began collecting data on the condition's incidence in children. The CDC's report attributed some of the increase in its prevalence to more screening for the condition. Researchers have pointed to several other factors, including greater awareness of what autism looks like.
A
I'm sure
hundred
you
percent, a
become an expert
hundred
on this. Yeah,
percent.
yeah,
Yes, and they didn't discover all of this mountain range until recently, and I'm pretty sure the mountain range was there before they discovered it.
yeah.
Listen, nobody was talking about autism when we were in school. I'm
I don't
63 years
remember it.
old.
Yep.
I don't remember one person mentioning that word. When I first heard about autism, it was through the movie Rain Man. It was
Yes,
through,
you're right.
Judge Wapner,
I
and I
remember it.
had no understanding of what it was. And so when I had a child who was fully verbal at 1, who had a college level vocabulary at 5, I was realizing that we were dealing with a different kind of computer brain system. Most of us are on Apple point and click, and she's like coding fast in a million ways.
Amazing.
And she has party tricks. She tells me about the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest part of the ocean that's ever been
Hmm.
measured. She knows facts about the Mariana Trench that would make her win on Jeopardy. And I constantly Google to see when she goes to bed, is that true? It's true.
Wow, wow.
There's some sort of hybrid intelligence that happens as well. Now it's a spectrum. It's from people as brilliant
Exactly.
as Albert Einstein to people who sadly cannot talk. But that doesn't mean their lives are worth any less than the next person.
That's right. They're children of God, And Rosie, I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about your documentary. In case folks who are just tuning in, Rosie has a new documentary on Hulu, Unleashing Hope: The Power of Service Dogs for Children with Autism, and we see examples of your child and the amazing things that she can do. And I was watching this and thinking to myself, this is I mean, I thought my little girl was brilliant. Obviously, when she was,
Yeah, of
we all think our
course.
kids are brilliant.
Yes,
I was watching this video of your child, and I was like, wow,
right.
this
9
is,
years
and you said
old.
this is different.
This is different. 9
Yeah,
years old. When, I said to her, "Will you sit down and talk about how Kuma has changed our life?" And she says that we left it in the documentary. I really would like to, but I have a lot of drawing to do. Like
I got
and
work to
there's
do.
Caleb, the beautiful boy in the documentary who was so giving and his family so loving and so articulate. He could express every emotion he felt about the dog verbally, whereas
Wow.
my child expresses it in a different way. Her stimming stopped. She was stimming incessantly. Her
Mm.
stimming was lessened. Not that there's anything wrong with stimming because it's how they regulate themselves.
What do you mean
Her
by
sti-
stimming? And for folks who don't understand that,
Stimming is anything from flapping your hands to incessant moving your hair. And for
okay.
her, right now, it's running. She runs the
Mm.
perimeter of every room that she's in. So we have to
Interesting.
move the couches and the chairs away from the wall so she can run the entire perimeter of the house and then crash as hard as she can into the couch. And that's what her body needs, that kind of stimulation in order
Wow.
to regulate herself. And when she's more upset, there's more stimming that happens and that
Mm.
goes on. Now, when she would be a little out of control with the stimming, I could give a command to Kuma, the service dog, and that dog would lay on top of her. That dog would
Wow.
would put his head on her lap, would put
That's
his
cool.
head near her hands that couldn't stop moving and couldn't stop
So he
touching
speaks
her
his own
hair.
language.
Exactly. It's its own language, and this dog is a miracle. And
Mm.
the fact that Guide Dogs of America does this service, Jim, for free, because
Yeah. Tell us about that.
the machinists union years ago had
Yeah.
a man in the union who went to get a dog, and they told him he was too old. He was losing his sight. And what did they decide to do for their union brothers and sisters? Create their own Guide Dogs of America service so that no one would be able to be turned down because of the age of the person applying. So
Mm.
they did minus the red tape, and they've been doing it for 50 years. And it is the most unbelievable group of people I've had the privilege of meeting and knowing. They changed my heart. I feel like the Grinch. My heart grew 10 times that day to
Yeah.
spend 10 days with 10 blind people, 10 parents of autistic children, and 10 veterans from different wars who are now suffering from PTSD
Mm.
and or mobility issues due to cancer from the burn pits, to have to interact with them all of that time for 2 weeks away from your own child, that was the scariest part for me, to tell you the
Yeah.
truth. I
Yeah.
didn't know how they would do away from me for that long because we had never been separated for that long ever.
Wow. Wow. And so tell me about how the dog came into your, Kuma is the name of the dog,
Yes,
and how
Kuma.
Kuma came into your life. I mean, how did did you put the pieces of the puzzle together and say, wait a minute, maybe a dog might help? Did somebody come to you and say, try this?
Yes, I was at the end of my rope because when she was 9, she started turning inward and turning darker. And this
Mm.
photos I can show you of her up till 8 or years old, happy and laughing and bubbly. And then 9 to 11, we were in the dark place. And some of her drawings had knives in them or bloody
Mm.
hands. And I would say, "What is that?" And she'd say, "They got stabbed." And I was like, "Well, where did you hear that?" And she
Yeah.
just was in like a morose kind of sadness, and I didn't
Mm.
know how to reach her. I felt like she was drifting away. So I,
Wow.
being a person of privilege, had the access to the UCLA Autism Center. I had access to therapists and to OTs and to PTs, and we did every service and every therapy that had been recommended to us, and still she was floating away. And
Mm.
about 3 years ago, I became friendly with Lyle Menendez. Lyle Menendez had written me in 1996 and thanked me for supporting him and his brother and speaking so highly of Leslie Abramson and the work that she did during their trial, trying to convince America that sometimes fathers committed atrocities against their children, and these two boys were victims of that. And, the public was unwilling to hear. But I spoke out for him in 96, and he wrote me right when my show premiered.
Mm.
And I said to Barbara Walters, we were having dinner one night, and I said, I got this letter. It was thick, like many pages, handwritten from Lyle Menendez. And she had interviewed them a few months before. And she said, just like she always would, Wozy, he's a manipulator. Please, whatever you do, don't return his call. So I kind
That's a
of
great Barbara Walters, Barbara
thank you
Wawa.
very much.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
did love her very much. She was quite something, I can tell you that.
amazing. Yeah,
But she told me not to, and it was the height of the beginning of my show, and I didn't quite know how to answer some of the questions he had. And it wasn't until 3 years ago when a new documentary came out with new evidence about Roy Rossellio from Menudo, who was sexually abused by Jose Menendez
I remember
in
that.
the same house that the boys grew up in, and an Eric letter that he had written to his cousin that was not introduced in evidence way before the murder about the sexual abuse from the father. And so these two new pieces of evidence started a habeas corpus. I believe that's the technical term, that
Yeah,
they would get it relooked at so they could possibly be resentenced or maybe perhaps have another trial. And that was what the documentary was about. And so
mm,
I went on TikTok and I said, I believe them. I believed them 30 years ago and I believe them now. About 2 days later, my phone rang and a woman said, my cell phone, which, was not publicly available.
yeah.
Hello, this is Rebecca Menendez. I am Lyle Menendez's wife. And I was like, Lyle Menendez has a wife, and he has had a
Wow,
wife for 30 years, a brilliant wife who is a
wow.
lawyer and who has never once been seen in the public. But she has supported him and loved him and helped him with his case for all of this time. She's a remarkable woman. She told me that he wanted to talk to me. So I said, well, give him my number.
Yeah.
And on Mother's Day, a few years ago, the phone rang and it was him.
Mm,
And we talked for
wow,
2 hours that day. And
wow.
can you imagine though, you're in prison for 3 decades and you have your
Yeah,
group of people, your 7 or 10 people outside that are relating to you. It's difficult to relate to someone who's
right.
in prison on death row, not death row, but life without the possibility of parole, what they call it in the jail, which is what I learned when I went to visit him and how I saw the service dogs. I said to the service dog handlers, oh, you must be getting out if this is your 12th dog.
Mm,
And the guy looked at me and said, no, ma'am, I'm life without. And I didn't know what he meant. I
wow.
said, what do you mean life without? He said, without the possibility of parole. And
Yeah.
it just made me weak in the knees, Jim. I didn't
Mm,
know what to say to him. Here he had given 24 years of his life training these dogs for years at a time to give to other families, and he was never to be released from prison.
wow. That's
And
incredible.
I was very moved, and I said, who do you give these dogs to? And they told me that it was vets, it was people who were blind, and it was kids who had autism under the age of 12.
Hmm,
And I said, "Oh, well, I'd like to thank you on behalf of autism parents. I don't have a dog, but I'm sure that if I did, I would be great." And Russ, the man who runs Guide Dogs of America, said, "Why don't you have a dog?" I said, "I never heard of this."
mm,
And I've been
interesting.
like the queen of Google for autism
You had
since she was
Googled everything,
diagnosed.
right?
Since she was diagnosed, I did a deep dive to try like every parent does. When your child is diagnosed with autism, you don't get a guidebook.
No,
Nobody
yeah.
tells you, here's what it's going to be like, because if you meet one child with autism, you've met one child with autism.
Not all of
Caleb's
them.
autism is not the same as Clay's autism, is not the same as someone else's autism.
Mm,
It comes in a variety of flavors and spices and different kind of neurodiversity. And it should be celebrated, not ridiculed, not considered a disease, and not put on
yeah,
a list of
yeah.
people who don't someone doesn't deem as worthy as the next.
Yeah, and since you brought up the Menendez brothers, what do you think is going to happen in that case? Because it sounds as though, there was a ray of light that maybe they might get a day in court, might get released, something might happen, and then it doesn't. Now it doesn't look. like that's going to
Well,
take place with the new
I,
prosecutor out there.
I believe that it will take place, and I
Mm,
believe that Gavin Newsom has to stand up and say enough is enough.
yeah.
These boys, it has been proven every member of their family and the deceased parents' siblings are in support of them. Every
Yeah.
single member had, there was so much evidence of the abuse that the first trial was hung by both juries. Each boy had a separate jury,
Mm,
hung juries, both of them. The second trial, they decided because of the O.J. Simpson case and the embarrassment to the DA
yep.
that they were not allowed to use sex abuse as part of their trial. So they had
Mm,
no defense. That's when they were given life without the possibility of parole. It was
interesting.
totally a mistrial of justice. It was a. I'm not saying it right, but they did not provide them with a fair trial. They told
Yeah.
them they could not use the defense that was the truth, and
And
they've been in jail.
enough has been raised in this case. Questions have been raised. Serious questions have been raised in this case to the extent that it warrants reexamination. It warrants a new look as to whether
Yes.
they've served enough and should be able to be
And
free
oh,
men.
they were 18 and 21 years old.
Yeah,
Their
yeah,
brains were not fully formed yet. There's all kinds of laws now about
mm,
children, people who are considered children because their brains have not fully formed in their early 20s and their teens being given life sentences. Is that
yeah,
fair to do in our country? Is that
yeah.
fair to do?
No, of
And
course,
there's
yeah.
extenuating circumstances for these men, and they have impeccable records in jail.
Mm, mm,
Lyle has done so much. Eric has done so much.
yeah,
Eric is an amazing artist. He's done murals all over the walls at the prison when you're
fascinating.
inside. And Lyle has done the beautification project. They both counsel inmates who have been sexually abused and are trying
Yeah,
to get through it. They have done remarkable work while they
yeah.
were incarcerated.
And I have to say, it's amazing to me that you've made this one of your causes, and I do think that it's incredible what they've been through, and it seems to me, I think you're right. I think justice is coming. It's just taking its time. And I have to ask you, Rosie, because you're in Ireland right now. I just wanted
Yes.
to know, like, what's your life like? Because I mean, do you go down to the corner and go to the pub and they say
Yes.
Rosie, and does that
No, no,
happen?
no. I'll tell you the big difference. My show was not on here.
Okay.
So there's no real recognition. Now,
Oh,
I would
wow.
say maybe twice a day, someone will say, "Welcome, Rosie."
Oh,
That's it.
good.
Or if people see me, they nod and they wink, but nobody stops you. It's a very
Mm.
different culture. I was reading about Beyonce being here with her little baby years ago in the park in Dublin and no one coming over to her and her never
Wow.
having felt that before. So there's a freedom and there's a
Hmm.
lack of value on celebrity that America puts on it that is just absolutely over the top.
Or
You
maybe
know,
they know and they just leave you alone because they say, hey,
that's
you know,
exactly right. And
maybe a
people have
top of the
said to,
morning to you, that kind of thing.
they say, well, at a pub, they'll say, "Can I buy you a pint?" I'm
There
like,
you
"Sure." They go, "Why'd you move here, sweetheart?" I said, "Donald Trump." They said, "Give me a hug." And they want to hug me,
You
right?
get lots of hugs, I'm
I
sure.
get lots of hugs here in Ireland for my political stances. I can tell you that. It's a country that I'm aligned with a lot of their policies and beliefs.
Yeah.
And it's very freeing to be in a country where you don't worry that half the people looking at you are thinking that you're the worst thing that ever walked because you're against the fascist in the White House.
Yeah. Well, and do you think you'd ever come back?
Well, I would love to come back because that's
Yeah.
my country and I was born
Yeah.
there and I have children and they all live there. And, they're going to have babies soon. And my one daughter has four children and she lives in Wisconsin and we don't see her as often as we would
Mm,
like to. But when my other ones have children, I know that I'm going to want to be an available participatory grandparent. And I'm waiting for the country to right itself. I'm
yeah.
waiting for the people to stand up and say, no, this is not innately who Americans are. We are not cruel people. We are not
Yes.
people who don't care about our neighbors. We are people who do. I grew up on Long Island in the 1960s and 70s, and my mother died when I was 10. And you know who took care
Mm,
of us? The mothers in the other houses of suburban Long Island.
bingo.
They took us to get our first doctor's appointment when we needed to. They took us when we broke our arm to the emergency room. They fed us, they clothed us. Jackie Ellard's mother, Bernice, and Leonie Norden, who just
Mm,
lost her husband this week, they took care of us as if we were their own.
wow.
And that's the America that I know and love. And
Me
I, of
too.
course, yes, and I want to come back and I want
Yeah.
this feeling as though you're better than someone that you can put into a group that you can name. The attacks on trans people when they're less than
Oh,
1% of the population, the most vulnerable people that we have in the gay community, to
yeah.
attack the trans people is just so unbelievably un-American. It's
It is,
un-American.
and
And
it's almost as though you've been hearing me when I yell at the TV when those ads come on, because to me it is classic Trumpism in its rawest form, and that his I think his mind tries to think of who is the most vulnerable population out there, what is the most
yes,
vulnerable segment of society out there, and let me put my finger on those people, let me pick on those people because it'll score points.
yes, he
I
does. He's trying to amass the underbelly of hatred that the civil
yeah,
rights movement started to address. And with the arrival of Donald Trump and the Republican Party, Mitch McConnell, I put in that list too, telling Obama that he would not help him in any capacity and would block him at every turn, and then
yeah,
doing it, not allowing him to
yeah,
appoint Merrick Garland, who I question whether or not that would be a good appointment now.
yeah,
However, they wouldn't appoint him because they didn't want to and nobody made them. Like, that's what really gets me, Jim, is
yeah.
I'm watching what Trump is doing with this man who he sent to El Salvador, who was innocent
Mm.
of any crime, and
Hasn't been convicted.
he is refusing due process, and he's refusing to let him come back,
Well, and I
to
and I
demand that he be returned. How
and
dare he?
I agree with you, and he has, made comments about maybe applying that to Americans, that he wants
Yes,
to go after what he calls the homegrowns. When the president of the United States starts talking about going after the homegrowns, it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of this, Rosie, and I do think that we are in a place right now where it's not about left versus right; it's about pro-democracy versus anti-democracy.
I completely agree. It is no longer left versus right.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
feel as though we on the left have to be more considerate and understanding of the lies that were fed to these people who are
yeah,
not perhaps as knowledgeable about television production and whether or not the news is actually the news or entertainment. Many years ago, as you know, they
yeah.
switched the news from its own division with its own integrity into the entertainment department, and
And
the fourth estate was blown apart.
And look what's
And we
happening
need a
now with
fourth
60
estate.
Minutes and everything else.
Can you believe what's
It's a
happening? That
crying shame.
any and I am so upset that ABC paid the money for George
Your
Stephanopoulos,
former company.
correctly, yes, calling
Yeah,
him a rapist, which the judge has said, and
yeah,
that they sued and they paid. And it
yeah,
reminds me of the stories we would hear in our neighborhood about the you know guys who would show up and say, "You owe us 250 a week," and you had to pay them. And
yeah.
once you paid them, they had you for everything.
That's right. It
They
doesn't make
had
the
you
problem go
forever.
away. And that's the mistake
It
that's been
does
made
not
here in
make
the
the
US.
problem go away.
That's the mistake that's been made here in the US. People think, well, if I just put a quarter in the Trump intimidation racket toll booth, the problem will go away. And it doesn't make it go away. It means you got to keep going through the toll
No,
booth.
it doubles it and it makes him do it bigger and more.
More and
Now
more.
he's suing 60 Minutes for billions of dollars, not
Yeah,
just the millions that he got from ABC, but for
yeah,
billions of dollars. And he
yeah,
has this Supreme Court full of his cronies that,
yeah,
are an embarrassment to the Supreme Court's legacy.
yeah,
And here we are in America going, we don't know how to stop him.
yeah.
Well,
People have to start speaking out.
and having the courts and judges and people stand up and speak out. And
Yeah,
that's what we must do. And don't let the fear of him stop you, no matter who you are, no matter what you think, because once democracy dies in America, it's over for the world.
yeah. Rosie, it has been such an honor and just a real pleasure and a joy for me to connect with you and have this conversation. You are, I mean, the light you are shining in this interview. I have to tell you, I've been keeping an eye on the comments as you've been speaking, and people have just been overjoyed with a lot of, I mean, just about everything that you've said since coming on. So I appreciate everything that you have said. Um, and I encourage everybody to watch your new documentary. I can just tell it's absolutely from the heart. Okay, Rosie O'Donnell, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I'm going to try to bring in Ryan Lizza because Ryan is also supposed to be on the program this hour. We're doing a special hour of the Jim Acosta Show right now, and I typically come on at 4 o'clock. And we had to bump it a little earlier because Rosie puts her kid to bed at this hour, and so she was gracious enough to come on this afternoon in the evening for her over there in Ireland. And there's Ryan Lizzer right there. Hey Ryan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jim. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. I just had a fascinating conversation with Rosie O'Donnell. Her signal was kind of losing its strength there at the end, and it may have dropped off, but it was right there as I was saying goodbye to Rosie. So it kind of worked. But
I
that was
saw no, I saw a good chunk of it there at the end. I missed the beginning, and
Yeah, she's passionate, man. And I will tell you, I mean, everything that she says is absolutely from the heart. And I mean, she has some very important things to say about RFK Jr. and what's been happening in the Trump administration and public health, as she has been, caring for her child with autism. And it's something that, as she was saying during that interview, one child with autism, okay, you understand that one child and what they go through. It doesn't tell you what every other child with autism is going through, and so it was helpful to have her educate all of us about what parents in her situation go through. And it sounds like she just has a beautiful thing going over there in Ireland. So I appreciate her time very much. But Ryan, good to see you,
yeah,
and I guess welcome to Substack, right?
yeah. Thank you, Jim. Obviously, I think anyone who jumps on here from the MSM owes you a bit of a debt of gratitude.
Oh man,
And I think, as I told you and a number of other people, if it doesn't work out, I'll be sleeping on your couch, hopefully.
that's
But
fine.
yeah,
I'll
I'm
get a
all
pull
in
out.
on I'm all in on this endeavor, and I have to say, after just 3 days, it's just been a amazing, fun experience. I feel like in newsrooms in Washington right now and New York, nobody's having fun. And part of
No,
that is because what we're covering, right? It's dramatic, it's disorienting, it's terrifying sometimes. So there's not a lot of fun to be had, but even aside from that, people are miserable in newsrooms in Washington and New York,
yep,
and the Substack, the whole culture is so different and so inspiring. And so I texted Hamish today, one of the co-founders, saying, "You have
yeah,
just built an incredible platform here, and I should have done this years ago." So that's my view of it
yeah.
2.5 days in. Maybe a month from now, I'll have a different view.
Well, I predict you're going to be a lot happier going independent in the days and weeks ahead, and you're just going to like it more and more. I've enjoyed it because of the independence of it, because and I enjoyed working with my colleagues and my old place, and there were editors that I really liked, and executives, and so on, and my old boss Jeff Zucker, and so on and so forth. And you enjoy
Great
all that.
guy.
But you and I are in a similar place in life, somewhat long in the tooth. Maybe I'm a little older than you, but you sort of put the tools in the tool belt to the extent that you can kind of do this on your own, and you know how to stay out of trouble, and you want to give people news and information. You have a passion for it, and you can just make it work. And this is a great place for that to happen.
Yeah, it's almost like a light goes on once you do it for a couple of days, and you realize, like, oh, this might actually work out.
Yeah,
And the psychology just flips around completely, where I think, why the hell was I ever giving my intellectual property? Two thoughts. Why was I giving all of my intellectual property and writing to some of these places? And also, why the hell did I spend all of that time on Twitter writing
That's
without
true.
anyone giving
I've thought
me
about that
a
too. Like,
red
why are we
cent?
putting stuff on Elon Musk's crazy website? You know what I mean? Like, and I still
So
succumb to it.
I think it's great. It's been an interesting experience because I've had this back and forth with political weight. But before I get to that, I wanted to say two
Yeah,
things about Rosie. One, her comment about being in Ireland and how people there don't make a big deal. That is a classic. I've got a little Irish in me. I've been over there a bit. That's a classic Irish thing. Is
I
you
have to say, yeah,
don't. You don't you play it cool. You're
yeah.
not impressed by anyone
Yeah.
who's famous. I'm sure
They're
you're
very
Irish.
polite over there.
They're very polite. Your Irish readers are probably the least impressed by, viewers are the
It's
least impressed by you, Jim.
totally,
The
no, there's no
second,
question about it. And I really like that about what she had to say. And I mean, also, how many times have we heard from celebrities? And I know she said that she didn't say this out loud before he got reelected, but how many celebrities have we heard from who said, "If this happens, I'm leaving"? Well, she did it.
yeah,
She did
yeah,
it.
she
So you
actually
got to
did
give her
it.
that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I don't think she'll be
Yeah.
the last one to do it. I think one of the most unsettling dynamics of the last few months is how many conversations I've had with people who I never thought would say this, but seriously have that kind of conversation. Some of them
Yeah.
because they're worried. They're people, names we know, and they're personally worried about being targeted by the Trump administration, and others just normal people who are so despondent over the direction of this administration. And
Yeah.
you know, it's those conversations. I'm sure you've had those same conversations. They're real. So I don't think Rosie's going
Yeah.
to be the last person. She made
No,
one
and
other point out. Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
She was you and I think maybe it was you that said this, and the so much of what Tellus.news, my new publication, what we really want to own, the space we want to own is all of the reporting on the weaponization of the government. I mean, that is
Yeah.
the story. When we talk about the erosion of democracy and democratic backsliding, like where it's happening, I mean, we still have elections, knock on wood. All of the trappings of democracy still exist. We still have three branches of government, but the weaponization, the use of the federal government as a tool to attack and target Trump's perceived enemies, that to me is the core anti-democratic thing that's going on.
That's right.
For Telus, that's what TELOS.news, that's what we really want to own in terms of reporting. And when you were talking about the targets, I don't think that's an accident that they are the most difficult people to defend, whether it's elites like journalists, lawyers, academics, Ivy League universities, very hard institutions and people to defend because they're frankly not that popular.
Yeah.
And then, of course, on the other end, poor, disenfranchised immigrants and minorities. And I don't
Yeah.
think that's an accident, and it's not the first time we've seen this from a government.
No, there's no question about it. But we're in a new place, and I think what you touched on and what Rosie was touching on is absolutely important. And as you were talking, Ryan, about this aspect that hasn't really been covered enough, and that is the weaponization of government. It brings me back to what took place. What was it? A couple of weeks ago, when Trump basically declared a fatwa against Miles Taylor and Chris Krebs, when he announced that this executive order, he's directing the Justice Department to investigate two people for what? For telling the truth. Miles Taylor wrote an op-ed in the New York Times anonymously, calling out the BS going on in the first Trump administration, and Chris Krebs for saying it was a free and fair election back in 2020. I mean, again, this is all about chasing his grudges.
It's absolutely
Yeah,
astonishing to see individual Americans and universities, law firms named in executive orders
yeah,
the way that he's doing. And I know there's a lot going on. And I mean, I wrote about this on Monday. that to me was sort of the moment when I realized just journalistically I knew what I wanted to sort of devote my attention to was really digging into the executive orders and frankly the one that you just mentioned, you know, exceed it's hard to say which one's worse, but just anyone that mentions a person by name is just like nothing we've seen in the history of presidents using executive orders. It's just never
Yeah.
been what no president would ever do that.
And he knows what
Um,
he's doing when he does that. When he names people individually like that, he opens the floodgates of hate and death threats and extremists who are going to say all
Yeah,
kinds of things
yeah,
on social media and maybe try to swat your house and dox you. And so he knows exactly what dark forces he's unleashing when he does that. And I think that's part of the purpose. The part of the maybe part of it is he maybe is not serious and perhaps not going to see it through, but he knows in the meantime he can make life difficult for those people.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm sure you've seen it yourself when you've been the subject
sure.
of a social media post from him.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like when I going through the Paul Weiss episode just really shook me
yeah.
because I was doing some reporting and just sort of went down a rabbit hole into how Paul Weiss was changing the language on their website. And individual
Wow.
attorneys, some of the top partners at that firm, literally deleting their proudest achievements from their biographies, and Paul Weiss erasing some of its proudest history from its own history, just
Wow.
memory holing it. And
Yeah.
there's one
And
lawyer I
that's what
wrote
he
about.
wants to take place with January 6th and everything else. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
that was and those were the case. It was one attorney who did some pro bono work on some January 6th
Hmm.
cases, and then she was also a top prosecutor on the Mueller team. Before Trump was in office, you go to her page and look at her experience. This entire paragraph about her proudly talking about all of the prosecutions that she was responsible for during the Mueller investigation. That has now completely disappeared. And I just
Wow.
looking at the sort of specificity of like comparing the two pages and just thinking, imagine if that happened to me. I was targeted in an executive order and I literally was so scared. I had to like rewrite my own biography.
Yep.
And that just, I don't know. I think everyone has a different moment of like extreme clarity about like what's going on. And for me, that was the moment. And it was the moment where I was like, all right, I'm actually going to do this. I see all these other great journalists on there, and I'm going to start a publication that's sort of, devoted to reporting about this issue.
Yeah, and I know you got one eye on this podcast and perhaps another eye on your laptop or on your email, waiting to see if you've gotten a response from your former employer and you've written about
Yeah.
this and they basically came after you and said, you shouldn't be talking about corporate media.
Yeah.
What happened there? Can you?
It's kind of a bummer too. I was looking at the main page of my Substack, and I'm like, God, all this stuff about Politico that I don't want to be writing about
Of
this, and
course,
it's
yeah,
and it you know the first day I wrote an 1,800 word piece, Jim, just from the heart, trying to explain where I've been recently and what I want to do with this Substack. And yeah, the piece included some pretty sharp criticism of how the media that I came from, frankly, including a couple of examples of Politico, how I feel like they're not meeting the moment right now. Um, I thought it was very respectful criticism, to be frank. And that night, I got a couple of urgent phone calls, and someone left this garbled message on my phone, and all I heard was like violation, and you need to take it down. And I thought,
hmm,
take what down? Then 20 minutes later, I got a letter from the top lawyer at Politico demanding that I delete an 1,800 word article that
hmm,
was mostly about the Trump administration's weaponization of the government and was mostly about this Paul Weiss reporting I was just telling you about that because that hadn't been reported before, those sort of changes. Um, and I was just blown away. And it's scary to get a demand letter like that with all the legalistic language. And they were trying
yeah,
to say that I violated some boilerplate language in a non-disparagement clause in my contract.
yeah.
So, yeah.
No, if you had another thing to say, please say. But I mean, what I read when I read your piece, what I took from it was more of a general criticism about the Washington press corps, about corporate media in America, that nobody's really, living in a glass house right now. You know what I mean? And there have been,
including criticism of myself and saying it took me far
sure.
too long. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look what just took place at CBS with 60 Minutes. Only the third executive producer in the history of 60 Minutes resigned and said he did it because I can't be independent. I can't make independent decisions. When the executive producer, folks, of 60 Minutes says I can't make independent decisions, there should be a siren going off, in every newsroom in America.
And I want to ask
And
you a question about that,
yeah,
Jim, and that because I think it's important to explain why and why is that? What is different now? To me, what it sounds like is you have corporations that are suddenly reaching their hands down into these newsrooms because of this new regime.
and Semaphore reported, and they just reported this, that the owner of Paramount, Sherry Redstone, in recent days sought to know which upcoming 60-minute stories were about President Donald Trump, according to two people familiar with the situation, triggering a series of events that ended with the Tuesday resignation of the show's longtime producer, Bill Owens. He resigned this week, complaining that he no longer had the editorial independence to run the iconic Sunday evening news show. I mean, Ryan, and you and I are old enough to know like the history. I mean, 60 Minutes, Mike Wallace,
Yeah,
Jesus Christ, what are we
yeah.
doing in this country when we're fucking with 60 Minutes?
One of the most
I,
fiercely
I
independent shows out there. I mean,
pardon my
the
language,
bad
but
news.
that's
No, no, it's as bad as you say it is, and
yeah,
for viewers that don't understand, there are people who might not know 60 Minutes as well. This is the gold standard in our business in terms of broadcast investigative reporting,
yeah,
and they really believe in their independence over there, and for this resignation to happen, it meant that a line was crossed that just in the old days in our business did wasn't crossed. There really has been a separation between church and state in newsrooms for a long time. It's been breached occasionally,
yep,
but it's a norm that just has been so important that is now being violated because these big companies are scared shitless about what Donald Trump might do to them.
yeah. And whatever, if they're selling a company or buying a company or spinning off a company, there's just, and it's a cautionary tale, and it's why we can't have corporate media, gumming up the works of newsrooms in this country. I mean, at some point, for Christ's sake, you have to have independent journalism in this country, or we're going to be completely hosed. We're not going to know
Yeah.
what the truth is. We're not going to know what reality is. And I think that's that's what's going on with what you're trying to do right now, Ryan. And I applaud you for taking a stand and just trying to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and look, I just to finish the story about Politico. I
Yeah,
mean,
please.
one of the criticisms I made, and I stand by this, is when Politico was attacked earlier this year in a completely fake, illegitimate way by the president, trying to argue that Politico was being funded by the federal government because the federal government paid for subscriptions to Politico. A thousand crazy stories ago, but you might
Yeah.
remember that one.
Oh yeah.
And I thought they made a huge mistake, and this is what I wrote about. They sent our White House correspondent um, on stage at CPAC, which is just a sewer of media bashing and right wing conspiracy mongering, and this year included activists who were advocating for having Donald Trump serve a third term, and put our one of our great reporters on stage, and this was a way to suck up to the Trump administration.
Yeah.
That's what it was, and I wrote about that in the piece, and I stand by that criticism because I think
Yeah.
it's hard to look. It is harder to criticize people when you're inside, and I think our friends in the press. Sometimes it hurts to hear criticism, but
Yeah.
it's important to hear it. And so the final leg of this story is I responded to Politico. I told them, of course, I'm not taking that piece down. That I was shocked and appalled that they would ask me to do that. especially considering I'm supposed to be a guest of theirs at the White House Correspondents' Dinner this weekend, where we're all supposed to celebrate the First Amendment.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and I asked them to retract their demand and apologize, and gave them a deadline of 4 o'clock today.
Good.
So
Well, keep us posted. I guess
that's
we
that
got
story.
6 minutes to go.
No email yet, but I'm hoping cooler heads will prevail there, and they'll back down.
And what stands out to you about where we are right now? I mean, we talked about the threats to democracy and so on, but it seems to me that Trump has gotten himself in so much trouble on the economy that has damaged him pretty badly. And it may have
Yeah,
damaged him to the point where he perhaps may not be the threat maybe in the near term that folks were perhaps worried about. I don't know. That may be
yeah.
naive of me to say that because who knows, he may lash out as a result of it to work through those aggressions. But it is pretty striking to see. He gets into the Oval Office basically on the backs of people being frustrated with the inflation and so on. And he proceeds to take a decent economic situation, not perfect, inflation was still bad, and just completely botch it. It's remarkable in the first 100 days.
I mean, my view of this is like, in the world of I hate in the world of soft authoritarians, it's not easy to we don't really have too many totalitarian places in the world, North Korea aside. And the modern authoritarian playbook is you got to keep the economy in good shape.
Yep,
Like the basis of your support to use the government for all sorts of other illicit uses is going to be to keep the economy humming along. So normal people who don't pay as much attention as you and I do just say, "Well, I don't care
that's
about
the
this."
trade-off. Yep.
Yeah.
Whether
So
it's
that
Putin in Russia, Orban exactly in Hungary, that's the trade-off.
Exactly. There are
Yeah,
normal people in those countries who had better lives after Putin came to power, and after Orban did a few things in the wake of some of the financial crisis. And if you don't tend to that, um, things can you lose support. So as we know,
yeah,
Trump's numbers on the economy are way down, and that seems to be uh, the Achilles heel of this project that they've embarked on.
yeah. And the other piece of news that stood out to me today is he stopped going after Jerome Powell, the chair of the Federal Reserve, hoping that the markets will tick back up because he's kind of a day trader. But he goes after Zelensky, so he has switched off of Jerome Powell, and now he's going after Volodymyr Zelensky and accusing him of trying to basically tank these peace talks. Which I mean, I don't even know if they're cracked up to be as peace talks if Ukraine doesn't really have a full seat at the table. I mean, it is kind of like peace talks in name only.
And meanwhile, the deadlines for Putin have come and gone.
Yeah,
Um, Putin obviously is just pocketing all of the concessions that Trump gave him up front, and is a smart and sophisticated enough player to understand how to manipulate Trump. This isn't the first time he's been, uh, done this, and all the outrage, of course, is to Zelensky, and none of it to Putin, who he gave a
yeah.
deadline to end the war.
Yeah. Well, and he put out a Truth Social post, I guess it was earlier today, and he was going after Zelensky, and he says he can have peace or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. And then Trump goes on to say in this Truth Social post, which is kind of like going to confession for him. Maybe it's because I've got the Pope on my mind this week, but Trump then says in the Truth Social post, quote, I have nothing to do with Russia, but have much to do with wanting to save on average 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. I love how Trump, he has to say, I
Why did
have
he? I
nothing
didn't
to
see
do with
this.
Russia.
What is? Okay, so I haven't seen this yet. So you're reading this to me for the first time,
I'm reading
but
this to you. This is a Truth Social post. Yeah, that
this
I
is what
got off of Truth
immediately.
Social.
All right, so that just jumps out to me immediately. Is why do you say, "Hey, I'm innocent of this thing you might accuse me of"?
I have nothing to do with Russia. There's nothing to see here. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. It's incredible.
That is, yeah,
It's sometimes hiding in plain sight with this guy. I don't know.
that's deeply, deeply weird, Jim. And we're going to spend how many more years are we going to have to spend trying to decode
That's
and
so true.
psychoanalyze this person? I do feel sometimes do feel as a journalist hostage to him and his people.
No, it's so true. It's so true. Well, Ryan, great to see you. Best of luck. And I'm real proud of you for what you've done with this new startup. I know you and I talked about this a couple of months ago, and I think it's great when people make a stand. And it's Telos. Is that how you pronounce it?
Tell us, yeah, tell us. It's
Telos,
a little,
Telos.
it's a little precious. I realize it's a Greek word for your mission, your aim,
I
and
like it.
um, and I liked the pun of tell us news.
Telos.
So
Oh, the Telos.
yeah,
Exactly. Telos.
te- tell us news. But I wanted it
Perfect.
to have that pun where it's both the sort of day to day, like tell us what's going on, but also not to forget that journalism should be mission oriented. And there's a reason we do this. It's not just to randomly write down what political combatants are saying, but
That's right.
there's a mission behind it.
Good
So
for you,
tell us
man.
news.
All right. Well, good luck. Keep us posted on all the other stuff. I know you're dealing with some other stuff, but keep hang in there on the Politico front, and best of luck with
That
this new venture.
I really appreciate it, Jim. I'll see you soon,
Good,
man.
good to see you. Okay, take care. Good to see you, man. All right, that was Ryan Lizza, old campaign trail buddy of mine for many, many years, and it's just incredible to see the twists and turns that one's career might take. And I, for one, did not foresee that I would be doing a podcast on Substack. I just did not see that happening, and here I am. I'm doing it, so it's been a lot of fun, and I enjoy it because I get to talk like almost every day with some cool people. Rosie O'Donnell earlier, Ryan Lizza, and Ryan and I could just sit around and do this forever. And then, of course, there is the amazing Don Lemon, who I just anytime I can talk to Don, it's a good day. Don, how are you?
Hey, great. Wow, that was quick. Usually I have to wait.
I know they got a few more hamsters on the little Substack wheel. It's spinning furiously, and we're firing on all cylinders here. So
How'd
good
your
to see
talk
you,
with
my
Rosie
friend.
go? I was sort of watching some of it and then I had to bow out to do some work.
She was amazing, and she wrote me a couple months ago to say, "Hang in there, Jim," and all this stuff. And I wrote her back, and we just kind of exchanged some messages here and there. And I reached out to her recently because I saw something where she had said something, and she has this documentary coming up, and I have to just plead ignorance. I don't know a lot about autism. I know much of what I know about autism is people coming out, experts coming out from time to time and refuting the bull crap that RFK Jr. spews about vaccines causing autism and so on. And it's just amazing to hear from Rosie because, as she was explaining to this interview, she's basically made herself an expert
Yeah.
in this, which is what parents of kids who go through these kinds of issues, what they become. And so it was really inspiring to hear from her.
Well, I have a friend who is an autism parent, right? And her
Mm,
son, I think, just turned 21 or 20, 21 or 23. I don't know. She's an amazing mom. And she's
yeah,
taught me so much about autism. And it's really something that we need to educate ourselves
so true.
about. And especially about vaccines, as you know, because
Yeah.
there's so much misinformation out there,
So much.
even with RFK.
And I have to ask you about this, Don, because RFK Jr. He's just not covered enough. We don't cover
Right.
him enough. There's all the craziness with Pete Hegseth and Signalgate. There's the daily hurricanes that Trump whips up on a daily basis because of the crazy stuff he says. And we're not covering what's happening over in public health enough, even though we just went through a goddamn pandemic where
Right.
and you have measles exploding out in West Texas, and you've got the guy in charge of HHS not giving a full-throated endorsement of vaccines.
Yeah, there was a measles. Someone had measles in my hometown of Baton Rouge. My mom and my sister sent it to me, saying this is frightening and scary.
Yeah,
But you're right about that because we keep covering, and look, deservedly so. We keep covering, we call the horse race or whatever of politics. But it's really important what's happening in Washington right now, and I
yeah.
hate palace intrigue. But now that we hear Jim, I don't know if you heard about this, but you know about the Tesla earnings. You know that Elon Musk says he's stepping back, and then
I
now
thought about
him
bringing
and
this up today. Yes, with you, Don.
we can talk about that. But he and Scott Bessent apparently had this shouting match
Yeah,
in the Oval Office. in the West Wing. What do you think?
Exactly.
Do you think it's real?
I think it's fascinating, and yes, I think it's real, and because I know the Trump people and how they operate, and obviously, I think Scott Bessent wanted to get this out there that he was having a screaming match with Elon Musk as Elon Musk is about to lead the government. I mean, the fact that he got on a call last night and said, "Hey, I'm going to be stepping back from Doge to spend time on Tesla, this big important company, which has taken a huge hit in the stock market."
Down 71% their
I
earnings in
mean,
the last
holy
quarter.
shit. I mean,
Can
it's
you
just
imagine?
it's unbelievable. And I mean, Don, you saw this up close and personal because you interviewed Elon Musk. Did you see any of this coming? It's so strange that he gets out on the campaign trail, Trump, during the 2024 campaign, spends all this money to get Trump elected, and then is given the keys to the candy store, given the keys to the castle, is able to run rampant across the federal government. And it's ended up being kind of like one of these rockets that he has that blows up, and now he's going to leave to go take
Yeah.
care of his company before that blows up too.
Look, you should, two things here. One is you should read my Substack, what I just wrote. I called it we can talk about that, but I call
Yeah,
it the confidence men, the men who are hired and do things and they just fail up. So,
yep,
and that's Pete Hegseth, right? And Donald Trump knows that he's not qualified, right? But he thinks that
totally.
if he keeps like pulling the strings on the puppet will start to, become competent and act on its own. But this Elon Musk thing, one, I've been very careful about what I've said about him because I'm in active litigation with him. But
Okay, I'll be
um,
careful.
I,
Yeah,
oh yeah, that's all right. I think I saw that interview was very prescient that I did with him. Did I
yeah.
think I thought that he um would possibly come out and possibly support Donald Trump, but because he said I'm leaning away from Biden, that's what he said in the interview.
Mm.
But I didn't think that he would lean so heavily into politics, and which is really dangerous when you have a business and you have to rely on the public supporting you and buying your products. It's oftentimes very tough to be a
Yeah.
political figure because it's so polarizing.
And he has made the Tesla brand toxic to its
Yeah.
own customer base. I mean, I was just walking my dog Duke earlier this afternoon, walked past a Tesla. The owner put a bumper sticker on it saying this is the pre-madness edition of this Tesla. I mean, you have people having to put bumper stickers on their cars to explain that they bought this car before what Elon Musk did. I
Mhm.
mean, that's not good for your brand. If you have a brand, that it ain't good when people have to put disclaimers on your product.
Well, the market hasn't closed yet, but I think most things were up today. But I don't
Yeah,
think Tesla is up. I think Tesla was in the red today. So, we'll see
yeah.
what happens by close. You can check it out if you want to look at it. But
I think
I think
it was up today, but it was recovering from some really bad days, and
yeah,
it's kind of maybe it's recovering because Elon Musk is going to go back, and that gives the investor community some confidence. But I'm not sure I would be that confident right now. I just, going back to your theme of confidence. And Don, the other thing too is this Pete Hegseth scandal with Signalgate. It's absolutely extraordinary. It's
yeah,
absolute. The fact that I mean, you and I, because we worked in television,
yeah.
um, to think that a weekend morning anchor would become the defense secretary. It's just kind of, what? Why did he
Look,
think this would turn out well? I don't know. It just seems to me like the
I,
warning signs were there. It sounds like
Jim, we've seen this movie before. I've lived this movie with confidence men, and
yeah,
I think that the bosses put them there because they're easily controllable, and they think that they're again they'll just do what the boss says. But you have to have credibility. You have to have some expertise. You have to have, some. You have to be qualified in some way to do those jobs. And if you look at, I mean, very simply, all you have to do is look at the previous defense secretaries and their qualifications, and
yeah,
all of the badges and everything on their chests and on their sleeves. And Pete Hegseth has none of that. And
yeah.
I talked about how he is so concerned about his public image and his press
I
that
noticed this.
well,
He was
because and that he accuses people of leaking, and he's the one that's actually leaking. Again, I've seen this story before. I've lived it.
yeah.
And now, after I wrote this, right, there's a story out now, Jim, that he is installing a makeup room in the Pentagon.
No,
Yeah.
no. They
Yes.
need to remove the mirrors, not add more of them. I mean, whenever
No,
I
I
see
think
him,
no. I disagree with you. I think that someone needs to hold a mirror up to the guy and say,
maybe
remove the
so.
mirrors, the physical mirrors, but yeah, the actual mirrors. But I think someone should say, look, that interview on Fox and Friends did not help you. And
No.
I was sitting there watching it going, ooh, shut up, shut up. But then I was like, no, keep talking, keep talking.
Yeah,
But
it's a slow-moving car crash is that's what we're watching right now. And eventually Trump will wake up to the reality that Pete Hegseth has to go. And it's just and because Trump right now is in a place, he's so furious, he's so angry with the media, he's so angry with DC. He doesn't want to give anybody a scalp. He doesn't want to throw Hegseth under the bus because he knows that means that other people will win and he will lose. And I can't imagine he wants to do it after what has taken place this week, where he's had to back down on Jerome Powell. He's had to back down. Apparently, there are reports that he may loosen these tariffs on China.
yeah,
He's Mr. Back Down. He's
he
Mr.
is.
Blink.
Yeah, he's not. He chickened out. He's a chicken. He chickened out on everything that he said. He did say. I saw the soundbite where he said that he would consider backing off on lowering them, not getting rid of them altogether. He said, but lowering them.
Yeah,
That is, that's a turnaround.
that
That's a blink right there.
that's it. He,
Yeah, and so
um,
Scott Galloway, I spoke to recently. I saw and also saw on the Pivot podcast, and he says he believes by 100 days that Donald Trump there's going to be a correction and an awakening, and that there's going to be some sort of huge fail. We'll see. It's 94
yeah,
days in, but it does appear that the business community somehow got to him and said, look, you got to stop this crazy shit.
yeah.
Scott Bessent, got to him. And I believe, which I'm going to do at 5 o'clock on my show on YouTube, is there a new sheriff in Dodge? I mean, Doge? Like,
Exactly. What happens to
get out of
Doge if there's no
Doge.
Elon Musk?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably a new sheriff. Maybe it took a while for Scott Bessent to gain the president's confidence,
Mm,
and then, but I think also the circumstances surrounding what happened to the market. Jim, Donald
interesting.
Trump is obsessed with the stock market. He's
He is.
obsessed with his press, money, and the stock market, right?
Yep.
And so, if either of those are going down, he's going to do whatever he has to do to correct it. And I think he saw the markets. He realized China is not backing down. He realized that people saw Scott Bessent or see him as the adult in the room. And so I think
Yeah.
that is why the market is doing better than it had been. Remember, it's still down. I mean, it's up
Yeah.
for the day, but it's still down below
I know,
where
and
it's.
I was thinking about ending my show talking about this, and that is, it's sort of the challenge of our time is whether we can start to think collectively as a country as opposed to just our own individual self-interest. And I know that that is probably asking too much, but when on the financial markets and the financial market, cable programs that you see out there, and they're all breathing a sigh of relief because Trump has come back to the reality that he can't fire Jerome Powell, and then it's all like a big ticker tape parade on Wall Street. And it's like, guys, this doesn't mean that the madness has stopped. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that we've left crazy town. We're still in crazy town. So, like it's not like the investor community can say, hey, great job, guys. All right, let's go grab a beer. No.
Well, no, well, the bar is so low though, Jim.
Yeah.
And I think, especially when you're dealing with money and you're dealing with inconsistency, and because the market likes consistency. When you're dealing with that, I think that any sign of some sort of normalcy, people
Yep.
are longing for it. And so like, okay, there's a possibility. He said he's going to back down or lower the tariffs. All right,
Right.
all right, let's do it. And then that helps the market. They're desperate for some sort of consistency and normalcy, which we just don't have right now. Donald Trump is
Yeah.
so erratic. He can do something in the next 5 minutes, and I'm sure that he will, to rattle the markets again.
Yeah, and there's no question. And Don, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about before I let you go, because I know you have to get ready for your show, is the situation over at 60 Minutes.
Mm.
And what an earthquake that is in our industry. I was talking about this with Ryan Lissa. And to
I talked
me,
about it with him yesterday as well.
when
Yeah.
60 Minutes is in trouble, that's a big damn deal. That is huge.
I said, Jim, you can agree or disagree. I said, this is another nail in corporate media's coffin. I don't think it's the
Wow.
final nail in the coffin, obviously, but I think it's another nail, especially in the confidence that people have in corporate media, the trust that they have in corporate media. And I think that is why folks like you know, over here on Substack doing extremely well. I'm doing okay on Substack,
You're
also on
doing great.
YouTube doing
Watch
well.
Done on Substack,
Yeah,
Watch Done on YouTube.
yeah. And so I think that's why we're having such success. And it's from, you know, you saw the New York Times article that
Exactly.
our old boss, Jeff Zucker, said they don't care if you're on the North Lawn and the South Lawn of the White House with pancake makeup on and all the lights and the shiny desks. They want people they like, they trust, and they care about. And I think that's
Yeah.
figures like us. People can trust that I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm also not going to bombard them with frivolous stuff. I'm not going to have false equivalency on my show. I'm just not going to do it. And I
Yeah.
think people, you know, people like that.
And
Um,
that's what they used to like about 60 Minutes. Mike
yes, yes.
Wallace, Ed Bradley, Andy Rooney.
But it also shows, Jim, that look, I think they want this, as you and I have talked about. These corporations don't want their business in Washington interfered with or blocked, right? Their mergers,
Yeah.
their acquisitions, and all of those things, their consolidations, and you know, whatever takeover of companies. They don't want that, and so they are cozying up to Donald Trump. They are bending the
Yeah.
knee, and now CBS may have to settle with Donald Trump if they want this Paramount merger
Trump.
to go through because Donald
Yeah.
Trump is suing them for a lot of money, and that is not this. That for me, you know, for the freedom of speech crowd, that is just total hypocrisy to
It
me.
seems to me Trump has figured out how to crack the code of how to hurt the press, how to hit the media where it hurts. And in part because these companies should never have been allowed to take over these news organizations to begin with and have the
Right.
kind of sway and influence over these news organizations that they've had over the last, what, 20 or 30 years that Don, you and I
Hmm.
have been in this business. We've
Hmm.
seen newsrooms get smaller. We've seen bureaus get shut down. We've seen talented journalists, photographers, producers, writers, and so on get laid off, all in the name of corporate downsizing and saving a little money here
Hmm.
and, investor confidence over there and shareholders value, blah, blah, blah. And it just has gotten journalists further and further away from being able to do their damn jobs. And
Yeah,
it's now
I,
infected 60 Minutes.
it's 60 Minutes, like one of the most trusted, you know, news magazines. If not, it is the most trusted news magazine
Yeah,
program, I believe, on the air today, in anywhere in the world. And right, 60 Minutes or 60 Minutes overseas, right? Isn't there an English
exactly.
British version of 60 Minutes?
There's an Australian version of 60
Yeah,
Minutes. I mean,
it's. Have you seen Good Night and Good Luck?
I I've seen the movie, I've not seen the play.
I went to see the play the other night, and it could have been today. It
Really.
was. It's yeah. I mean, I think the timing
I
is
want to see
just
it.
extraordinary. You must
It's like a
go
thousand bucks for a
see it.
ticket. I'm a bit of a
No, but
skinflint.
I maybe I can help you out. Maybe I know a couple of people, a couple of maybe I can give you some Clooney help. We'll see.
Oh
But
man, that'd be fun. Well, if you would go for an encore, viewing, I would love. We could go together. It'd be a lot of fun.
go and yeah,
Or
and
you could
write
put in a
about
good
it.
word for me. Look, little grease the skids. I'd appreciate it. That'd be great.
Are you going to be at the Correspondence Dinner? I am.
I am not. No, I am fortunately going to be out of town. I've got another engagement, a previously scheduled engagement, so I will not be attending the White House Correspondence Center. Which, by the way, they should not have a White House Correspondence Dinner if you're inviting Trump administration officials who work for a president who would shut down the press in a heartbeat if he were allowed to do it. I just don't think it's right. As much as I love the
It's
dinner, I
not
love the
right.
people there. It's not right.
It's not right. And again, for the freedom of speech crowd to cancel a comedian because you don't. That's what comedians do. They roast the
Exactly.
administration. I don't know if you have. I've been roasted at the White House Correspondence Center
Totally.
by the comedian, and
Me
I mean, I
too.
even flipped Larry Wilmore off, and we
I
took a
remember that.
picture.
You
After,
got
you
in so
remember
much
that?
trouble. Jeff was so pissed at you when you did that. That was
No,
so
he
funny.
wasn't. I don't know. He said he go. I think he thought it was okay, but
Oh, he thought it was okay. Okay. I thought
yeah,
you.
that's a whole different. That was a whole different time. That was when I'm just saying, in general, in the news business in general, there
Yeah.
are. I think that kind of old school news boss is, and I call them a boss because I think they're bosses. I think
Yeah.
that era may be over. The people, the news boss that who were the bulwark, or was the bulwark between us and the
And like
corporate
Jeff, I mean, Jeff
leaders.
Zucker, I have to say, he was an incredible boss in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we need
Yeah,
more of that in this day and age.
yeah,
But sadly, the exact opposite is happening, Jim. And to
yeah,
me, that is really sad. And again, it is showing up. And
yeah,
in the 60 Minutes story, the guy said, "I don't feel." He said it himself. Like I can, I have an independent. I can be independent in my journalism. And I think he was like saying, this is not credible,
yeah,
and there's too much influence coming from the top and too much pressure when and it's not journalism anymore, it's just sort of business and
yeah.
bowing to power.
Well, and that's why what you do, Don, is so great because you're getting to do now what you used to do on your old prime time show
Yeah,
when you had that latitude to just call it out, call out the bullshit, call out the lies, and that's what we need. That's what people want. That's what people are craving.
yeah.
And yeah, unfortunately, they
Jim, we
can't do
got
it.
to do this we should have a regular thing. I would love that, even if
Yeah,
it's just for a few
absolutely,
minutes, so that we
of
can talk
course.
about things. And maybe 4 o'clock. If 4 o'clock on a Wednesday is your time,
Let's do it. We'll
then
we'll
I'm
make it
good.
happen. I love
We'll
it. I
call it
think it's
Jim
great.
Lemon.
I love it. I love it. I need one of those little things in the background. I like the neon light thing in the background. That's pretty cool.
The lemon.
Yeah,
Here's the thing. Fortunately, the name lemon, right? There are lots of everything is lemon.
that's
So I just
true.
bought this. I bought this off of the internet. I think I'm going to get a custom one. I'll see if I can find one that says Acosta. But I like your setup. Your setup is very
It's
similar
okay.
to my other setup. I think the wall color was the same color, and you
Yeah,
asked me
this is
about it
like
once.
dad's office kind of thing. It's basically
It's
you.
great though. It's not stopping you. I mean, look at your lives, Jim. You're doing so well here. I'm so proud of you. I'm
Well,
not going to say that every time, but it's
I'm
great.
proud of
It's
you.
good. Yeah,
Well,
and guess
Don,
what? I was invited to the correspondence dinner. By the way, I'm not going to go to the dinner. I was also invited to some of the parties. I would like to go, but then it's just a lot, and I don't.
it's a
I don't know if I
lot.
want that negativity in my life. Why should I subject myself to that?
And then you're up until 2 in the morning. You're tired the next day for what? Just to like, I
Yeah.
don't know, look the other way when Kellyanne Conway goes by. It's like, oh, Jesus. I got other shit to do. Sorry. All right, we should go before I get in more trouble. Don, it's
No,
great to
you're
see you,
not in
buddy.
trouble, man. All right, guys. We'll see
See
you
you.
soon.
See
Okay,
you,
bye.
man. All right,
Bye
take
bye.
care. Good to see you, buddy. That's the great Don Lemon. All right, so every time Don and I get together, it just feels like the magic is back, right? We're having fun again. I always love talking to Don, and he's absolutely right. We should do this more often, and we will do it more often. And I just have to say, I had a thing that I was gonna say at the end of the show, but what I want to say, and I don't even know if Rosie is still watching. I think she had to put her child to bed. I just want to say just a real pleasure it was to speak with her. If you missed it earlier on in the program, the live is going to go into record mode, and then you'll be able to watch the recording later. Please watch. You want to watch Ryan, of course, and Don, but please watch Rosie and everything that she had to say because it was the perfect encapsulation of what a great mom does. And I'm so touched by it. She reminds me of my mom a little bit because my mom's got Irish in her, and it's just a reminder of what moms can do, mom power. And I just want to leave it at that. At the end of this edition of the Jim Acosta Show, an extended edition, a special edition of the Jim Acosta Show. Some of you guys tuned in at 4 o'clock, not knowing that I put a note out earlier saying that I would be on at 3 o'clock. And so if it seems like I'm wrapping up a little earlier, it's because we had to start at 3 o'clock because Rosie is in Ireland and she's several hours ahead of us. And so we wanted to start the show early enough so she could put her child to bed. But my thanks to Rosie O'Donnell. If you get a chance to watch her incredible documentary on Hulu, Unleashing Hope, the Power of Service Dogs for Children with Autism, it is now out on Hulu. Make sure you watch and check out Don Lemon's show every time that he's on Substack and on YouTube. And of course, Ryan Lizza, who has started Tell Us. It's not Telos. I was trying to add a little Greek pronunciation there. It's Tell Us, and just like you would say, tell us. And he's on Substack now as well, starting his new independent media venture. But anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. Enjoy all the comments that are always coming in. I know somebody just did a frown face. I didn't know it was going to be 3 o'clock. I'm sorry. It was because of Rosie, and I would do it every damn time. I would always start early for Rosie O'Donnell. We had a great discussion. If you missed any part of that, you got to go back and watch. But in the meantime, thanks everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. Always enjoy our conversations when we get together like this. And so In the meantime, still reporting from Washington, I'm Jim Acosta. Have a good evening, everybody. Take care. Good to see you. Bye bye.